Welcome, dear subscribers and curious listeners of my channel. One of the most mysterious and controversial houses at Hogwarts is undoubtedly Slytherin. The school divides students into 4 houses: Gryffindor, Ravenclaw, Hufflepuff, and Slytherin, each supposedly reflecting certain character traits. But if you take a closer look at Slytherin, much of it simply doesn't make logical sense. Today, I invite you to examine with me the strangest and most ambiguous things about this house. Enjoy the video. Number 1. Why do children live in a dungeon? Let's start with the obvious, yet rarely discussed. Each house has its unique location. Gryffindor is in a tower, Ravenclaw also high up. Hufflepuff is cozily located near the kitchens, but Slytherin, deep underground. It's dark, damp, and chilly. No sunlight at all. Some say the windows overlook the underwater world of the Black Lake. Sounds poetic, but we're talking about growing children here. Living underground with no proper access to light or fresh air isn't just strange, it's borderline unhygienic. Worse still, this physical isolation reinforces the emotional and social distance of the house from the rest of Hogwarts. Why were they assigned such a fate? Number 2. Why does Slytherin have the same number of students as the other houses? Speaking of odd symmetry, we can't ignore the surprisingly equal number of students per house. Both in the books and especially in the films, the distribution seems too perfect. How is that possible? Do exactly equal proportions of brave, smart, hard-working, and ambitious children get admitted each year? Or does the sorting hat take quotas into account when placing students? And if every child has a bit of all 4 houses within them, then what's the point of dividing them at all? Could it be that the sorting isn't truly about personality, but something else entirely? Number 3, how did Crabbe and Goyle end up in Slytherin? This brings us to another oddity. Look at Crabbe and Goyle, stereotypical goons, blindly loyal to Malfoy. But on what basis were they sorted into Slytherin? They're not brave, not clever, hardworking, doubtful. As for ambition and cunning, there's no sign of real initiative or hunger for power. So what gives? Either the sorting criteria are looser than we thought, or Slytherin has become a dumping ground for students who don't quite fit elsewhere. Number 4, Salazar, Slytherin and the Chamber of Secrets. No analysis of Slytherin would be complete without its founder, Salazar, Slytherin. He didn't just argue with the other founders. He left behind a Chamber of Secrets, a hidden area within the school housing a basilisk meant to cleanse Hogwarts of the unworthy. But how did the 3 other powerful founders, Gryffindor, Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff, not notice the construction of tunnels and a monster's lair under the castle? This wasn't a closet behind a curtain. Was Slytherin playing a double game from the beginning? And no one stopped him? Number 5, how did Snape become head of house? Now, to more recent history. Severus Snape is one of the most divisive figures at Hogwarts. How did a former Death Eater with a highly questionable reputation not only become a teacher, but also head of Slytherin? His teaching style was openly biased and hostile. He insulted students, humiliated them, shamelessly favored his own house. Students from other houses feared him, and yet he held that high position for years, with no objections from the school board. His relationship with Dumbledore may explain a lot, but it can't justify everything. Number 6, is Slytherin a house for evil wizards? At some point, it begins to seem like Slytherin is literally an incubator for dark magic. Voldemort, Bellatrix Lestrange, not the Malfoys. Nearly all major villains came from there. That raises a serious question. Does the sorting hat actually sense darkness in students and send them all to one place? Or maybe Slytherin isn't evil by nature, but has become a symbol of fear and exclusion over time? If a child hears 100 times that they're dangerous, won't they eventually begin to act the part? Number 7, prejudice. this theme comes to a head in a Deathly Hallows scene. When Pansy Parkinson suggests handing Harry over to Voldemort, McGonagall orders all Slytherins to be sent to the dungeons. All of them, no exceptions. This was pure prejudice. Surely some Slytherins wanted to defend Hogwarts, but they were denied the chance. When even wise witches like McGonagall default to seeing an entire house as a threat, it cements the division, and that's how internal enemies are born. Not out of malice, but because they've always been pushed into a corner. Number 8. Is blood purity a rule or just a tradition? Salazar Slytherin wanted only pure bloods in his house. That much is legend. He left the school over it. He built a hidden chamber to purge the rest. And yet, centuries later, the Sorting Hat placed Severus Snape, son of a Muggle man, into Slytherin without hesitation. Not just him, Tom Riddle too. Another half-blood whose father was a rich Muggle. How could that be? The house that was meant to be a fortress of blood purity quietly accepted the very thing its founder despised. Draco Malfoy, raised on bloodlines and family names, sat in the same common room as half-bloods. He sneered at Hermione for being a mudblood, but never once questioned Snape's place, or Riddle's, because somewhere along the way purity became a mask. The real requirement was ambition, power, potential. The old rule faded, replaced by something darker and harder to trace, a hunger, a willingness to dominate. The bloodlines became a symbol, but not the key. The Sorting Hat had changed the rules, and no one ever said it out loud. Number 9. Why wasn't the house shut down after Voldemort's fall? After the war, the castle was rebuilt. Statues stood again. Portraits were rehung. But Slytherin House, unchanged. The same green banners, the same snake emblem, the same dungeon dormitories beneath the lake. No apology, no reformation, no reckoning. Yet it was Slytherins who fled the battle. Slytherins who filled Voldemort's ranks. Slytherins who carried the name of fear. Why didn't the school even pause to ask, should we still be teaching children under that banner? The ministry restructured the Aura department. Laws were rewritten, families investigated, but Hogwarts stayed quiet, as if the war had passed over the school's foundations untouched. Not a word to the new generation of students about why they should still be proud to wear green. No effort to separate ambition from cruelty. No new Sorting Hat song warning of the past. Just silence. And in that silence, the message was clear. Tradition matters more than truth, even if that tradition built a house on the edge of darkness. Number 10. Why are Slytherins allowed to study dark magic unchecked? Draco Malfoy cast the Cruciatus Curse in his 6th year. Not in the shadows, but in the room of requirement. He carried a cursed necklace. He fixed a vanishing cabinet meant to smuggle Death Eaters into Hogwarts. All of this happened under Dumbledore's roof, and no one stopped him. No one questioned how a student had access to that kind of magic. When Harry used Sectum Sempra, a spell he found in the Half-Blood Prince's book, Snape punished him immediately. But where was that same energy when Slytherins whispered over dark artifacts in the common room? The fascination with dark magic wasn't hidden, it was part of the air around them. Lucius Malfoy once bragged about owning a collection of banned objects. His son knew how to handle them. And yet there were no lessons warning students of the dangers, no classes that taught defense beyond theory. The line between knowledge and temptation blurred, and Slytherins walked it daily, without guidance, without consequence, as if the school had quietly accepted that some houses were just closer to the dark. Number 11. Why didn't any Slytherins fight for Hogwarts? When the final battle began, Slytherin House vanished. Not a single student stayed to fight. While Gryffindors, Hufflepuffs and Ravenclaws stood their ground, Slytherins were marched away like baggage. "They're all gone," said McGonagall. "Let's secure the castle." It felt like a silent agreement. Slytherins don't fight for Hogwarts. But why? Are we meant to believe that every last one of them sided with Voldemort? Surely not. Not all Slytherins were Death Eaters in training. Some must have felt torn, afraid, confused, and maybe willing to help if only someone had asked. But no one did. No professor turned to the green-clad students and said, "This is your home too. Protect it." Not even Slugghorn, their own head of house, stepped up until much later, when the danger reached the gates. And even then he fought alongside Molly Weasley and Flitwick, but his students were already gone. The silence was loud. The story showed us a world where Slytherins never changed, never questioned, never cared. But what if they had? What if Daphne Greengrass had stepped forward, or Blaise Zabini defying his mother's pure-blood circles? We'll never know. The narrative chose not to show it, and by doing so, it deepened the divide. Not just between houses, but between who gets to be a hero and who's left behind the curtain. Number 12. The strange role of Horace Slugghorn. Horace Slugghorn was charming. He smelled of candied pineapple and self-satisfaction. Unlike Snape, he didn't bully students. He pampered them, but only a few, the ones he considered special. The Slug Club, as he proudly called it, was an exclusive circle. Hermione Granger got in, not because she was Muggle-born, but because she was brilliant. Harry, because of fame. Blaise Zabini, because his mother had married 7 rich wizards. It wasn't kindness, it was strategy. Slughorn collected names the way others collected chocolate frog cards. He claimed to admire talent, but his choices showed a different pattern. Influence mattered more than character. He once bragged about teaching a young Tom Riddle about how handsome, clever the boy was. He remembered giving him information about Horcruxes, like one might recall sharing a recipe. "I didn't know what he was going to do with it," he later cried, but he never asked, never wondered. He was blinded by potential, blinded by ambition, just like his house. No other professor at Hogwarts ran an inner circle of students. No one else divided their attention based on bloodlines or reputations. Yet Slughorn was praised, celebrated. He returned to Hogwarts with open arms after years in hiding. But what did his favoritism teach those left outside his velvet ropes? That they weren't important? That their worth was measured by how well they could network? In a school meant to inspire growth, Slughorn taught power, wrapped in sweets and silk. Number 13. Why didn't Hogwarts try to improve Slytherin's reputation? When Pansy Parkinson suggested handing Harry over to Voldemort, Professor McGonagall didn't hesitate. "Escort Miss Parkinson and the rest of Slytherin House from the hall," she ordered coldly. All of them. No questions, no exceptions, just guilt by association. That one moment captured the deep stain on Slytherin's name. A whole house condemned, as if none among them could choose bravery. Could Hogwarts not see what that did to young minds already raised in the shadow of suspicion? Dumbledore, the great advocate of unity, peace, and choice, never once made an effort to change how the world saw Slytherin. He praised Gryffindor's courage, Hufflepuff's loyalty, Ravenclaw's wit. But when did he ever defend Slytherin's ambition? When did he ever tell the students, "There is greatness in cunning too"? Never. Even when he awarded last-minute points to Gryffindor in the first book, it was all about courage. Slytherin, who led in points all year, was humiliated at the feast. What lesson did that teach? The staff followed that same silence. No speeches, no initiatives, no house-wide events to encourage collaboration, no effort to help Slytherin's bond with other students, not even a re-examination of the sorting system. Decades passed, wars were fought, families were broken, and still no one dared say aloud, "Maybe the problem isn't the students, maybe it's how we treat them." Slytherin became a self-fulfilling prophecy. Label them as the dark house, and they become it. Isolate them, and they close in tighter. Reward fear, and they grow cold. But what if one headmaster had stood before the school and said, "Ambition isn't evil, it's power with a choice"? What if one year the House Cup went to Slytherin for compassion instead of clever schemes? maybe then the name wouldn't be something children feared. Maybe it would be something they respected. Number 14. Why does the Sorting Hat keep sending students to Slytherin? The Sorting Hat once called Slytherin those cunning folk who use any means to achieve their ends. And then, year after year, it kept placing children into a house known for producing some of the darkest wizards in history. Tom Riddle was the brightest Slytherin of his time. A model student, a prefect, a charmer. And yet, the hat never hesitated. It placed him in the very house that nurtured his ambition and gave him the roots to become Lord Voldemort. Didn't the hat feel the danger in his mind? Didn't it sense the hunger? Bellatrix Lestrange, another proud Slytherin, was ruthless even before Azkaban hardened her. The hat sorted her too without flinching. So did it not feel her taste for cruelty? Her craving to serve someone stronger, someone darker? "The Dark Lord will rise again, Sissy," she whispered to her sister, her voice burning with fanaticism. Was this what the founders wanted? That the House of Salazar would become a forge of destruction? It's not just one or two. The list is long. Lucius Malfoy, obsessed with blood purity. Antonin Dolohov, a silent killer with a thirst for chaos. Even young Theodore Nott, quiet and brooding, carried the weight of a family loyal to Voldemort. And yet the hat sat calmly on each head and said the same word, Slytherin. How can a hat that reads thoughts be so blind? Some say the hat follows an ancient code, others believe it respects the will of the founders no matter the cost. But after 2 wizarding wars, after graves and scars and an entire generation lost to darkness, we're still left wondering, why does the hat continue to send children into a house built on fear, secrecy and legacy? And what if, just maybe, it's not a flaw, but a purpose? Number 15. Why do Slytherins rarely socialize with other houses? Of all the houses at Hogwarts, none feels more separated from the rest than Slytherin. The divide is not just symbolic, it is lived out in nearly every interaction or lack thereof between its students and those of the other 3 houses. While Gryffindors often laugh in the company of Hufflepuffs and Ravenclaws easily pair off with friends across house lines, the Slytherins remain curiously cloistered. In 7 full books chronicling the adventures of Harry Potter and his companions, there are shockingly few moments when Slytherins are seen mingling freely with others. They are a shadowed group, tightly bonded within but resistant to connections beyond. It is not just preference, it feels like policy. And in a school that claims to celebrate unity, this silent segregation demands attention. From the moment of sorting, Slytherin students are physically and socially distanced. Their common room is located in the dungeons beneath the Black Lake, in a space never even seen by students outside the house. When Harry and Ron disguise themselves as Crabbe and Goyle using Polyjuice Potion, they describe the place as cold, green-tinged and eerie. This subterranean lair stands in stark contrast to the warmth of the Gryffindor common room or the sunlit towers of Ravenclaw. The architecture mirrors the social reality. Slytherins live below, out of sight and out of touch. The Sorting Hat, that ancient arbiter of Hogwarts identity, gives early warning of Slytherin's isolation. In Order of the Phoenix, it sings, "Though condemned I am to split, you, four yet, cannot conquer it." Even the hat, forged from the minds of the 4 founders, warns against the divisions it perpetuates, and yet it persists in sending like-minded children into silos where they reinforce one another's worldviews. While other houses mingle in classes, clubs and Quidditch teams, Slytherins always feel like outliers. It is not that they are unwelcome, though sometimes they are. It's that they rarely attempt to bridge the divide themselves. The divide is not natural. It is curated. In Goblet of Fire, when the Tri-Wizard tournament is announced, the entire school is buzzing with excitement, and students begin forming alliances across houses, cheering for one another and placing bets. But not Slytherin. When Harry is chosen as a champion, the Slytherins, led by Malfoy, immediately ostracize him. They wear Potter stinks badges and mock him at every turn. None seem to question the morality of this stance. No Slytherin offers quiet support. The group acts in lockstep, almost as if deviation is discouraged. Even in times of crisis, the Slytherins stand apart. During Dumbledore's army meetings in Order of the Phoenix, students from all houses risk punishment to learn how to defend themselves. Hufflepuffs like Ernie Macmillan and Hannah Abbott, Ravenclaws like Luna Lovegood and Cho Chang, and of course Gryffindors, join in secret, forging bonds that transcend school politics, but not a single Slytherin joins. Are we to believe that none of them, not even one, were quietly horrified by Umbridge's tyranny, that none were curious, that none wished to learn practical defense? It strains credibility. The more likely explanation is that Slytherins were either discouraged from fraternizing or feared backlash from their own peers. Consider Draco Malfoy not merely as Harry's rival, but as a reflection of Slytherin culture. From his first appearance, he declares whom he considers worthy of friendship. He sneers at Ron for being poor and Hermione for being Muggle-born. When Harry rebuffs him, Draco finds his tribe in Crabbe and Goyle, whose loyalty is never based on affection, but on mutual protection. Their friendship is transactional and exclusive. Throughout his schooling, Draco never forms bonds outside his house, not even when opportunities arise. In Half-Blood Prince, he spends long hours alone, wrestling with dark tasks. And yet, even in suffering, he does not seek help from those outside Slytherin. His solitude is emblematic. There are exceptions, but they are pointedly rare and framed as unusual. Horace Slugghorn, the Slytherin head of house in Half-Blood Prince, cultivates a social club that includes students from other houses such as Hermione and Ginny. But even this mingling has a calculated edge. It's based on talent, pedigree, or potential. Slughorn is more collector than mentor, and while his behavior softens the Slytherin image somewhat, it highlights how rare such openness is within the house. Slughorn is not the norm. He is the exception that proves the rule. No other house is painted with such a singular brush. Ravenclaws are quirky but accessible, Hufflepuffs kind and inclusive, Gryffindors brave, yet prone to arrogance. But Slytherins are often shown as dangerous, prejudiced, or both. Even when J.K. Rowling attempts to soften this image late in the series by giving us glimpses of more complex Slytherins like Snape, the broader pattern remains. Slytherin is a house apart. And more troubling still, the school system allows, perhaps even encourages, this distance. In Chamber of Secrets, when the school is gripped by fear over the attacks on Muggleborns, the student body fractures along house lines. Gryffindors rally together, whispering theories. Ravenclaws and Hufflepuffs speculate nervously, but Slytherins, they're either suspected or silent. When Justin Finch Fletchley is attacked, Ernie Macmillan immediately suspects Harry, but not Draco, despite his frequent anti-Muggle statements. The Slytherins remain in their own corner, never reaching out, never attempting to clear their names or bridge understanding. Even professors appear to reinforce this isolation. Severus Snape, head of Slytherin, openly favors his students and is notoriously unfair to others. In Prisoner of Azkaban, he deducts points from Hermione for merely answering a question and excuses clear misbehavior from Slytherins. This behavior teaches students that bias is acceptable, that division is institutional. And if the faculty itself treats Slytherin as them, is it any wonder the students adopt the same stance? Physical space matters. Slytherin's dormitories are removed from the others, as are their common areas. Their classes often group them separately, especially in earlier years. Socially and spatially, Slytherins are taught to look inward. The result is an echo chamber where similar values, ambition, resourcefulness, self-preservation, are amplified in isolation. These qualities are not inherently negative, but without exposure to alternative values, they curdle into something colder. Number 16. Why were Snape's potions never monitored? Of all the mysteries tucked into the hallowed halls of Hogwarts, few are as quietly disturbing as the unchecked freedom Severus Snape was granted in his classroom. For nearly 2 decades, he was the sole gatekeeper of one of the most dangerous branches of magic taught at school, potions. And yet not once in any of the 7 books did anyone, not Dumbledore, not McGonagall, not even the Ministry, show the slightest curiosity about what exactly he was teaching his students behind the heavy wooden door of the dungeon. This lack of oversight would be unsettling under any circumstances, but considering the volatile nature of potions capable of causing death, madness, or enslavement, it verges on negligence. The deeper one looks, the more troubling the question becomes: what precisely was Snape passing on to his Slytherins, and who was watching? Snape was not just a teacher, he was a former Death Eater, a man who operated in shadows, skilled in deception and misdirection. While his true loyalties are a subject of legend, there's no denying that during his tenure he maintained a clear bias toward Slytherin House. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, Hermione received a scathing rebuke and lost house points for merely helping Neville during a lesson. Meanwhile, Draco Malfoy, who spent more time mocking his classmates than stirring cauldrons, was often praised. It's easy to dismiss this favoritism as petty house rivalry, but when applied to the teaching of potions, this partiality becomes sinister. After all, potions are weapons, and Snape was arming his own. Among the dozens of elixirs Hogwarts students were expected to brew, several had properties that would, in the Muggle world, be restricted substances under governmental control. Polyjuice Potion, for example, introduced in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, is so complex and dangerous that it takes a month to prepare and can result in catastrophic results if done improperly. And yet second-year students, children barely 12 years old, somehow knew of its existence. Hermione Granger, using information from the restricted section, brewed it without Snape's knowledge. Or so we're led to believe. But how likely is it that a teacher as controlling and perceptive as Snape would fail to notice students filching rare ingredients from his private stores? That particular potion is key to understanding the greater danger. If a second year could brew polyjuice in secret, how easily could Snape have instructed advanced Slytherins, say students like Blaise Zabini or Theodore Nott, in even darker arts? What's to stop him from quietly passing on the steps for crafting Draught of Living Death or Veritaserum in a way that grants subtle power to a select few? These potions can immobilize forced confession and simulate death. With such tools, manipulation becomes effortless, especially in the hands of cunning, ambitious students already shaped by the Slytherin ethos. No one ever inspected Snape's lesson plans. There's not a single scene in which Dumbledore or any other authority figure questions the content of his teachings. In Half-Blood Prince, the school is under siege, with Death Eaters poised to strike at any time, and yet Snape is given even more freedom when he finally takes over the defense against the Dark Arts post. His successor in Potions, Horace Slugghorn, is portrayed as absent-minded and nostalgic, a man more interested in his collection of promising students than in maintaining strict discipline. The implication is chilling. Hogwarts lacked any regulatory body for the curriculum of its most dangerous class. The very nature of potion making, secretive, ingredient-heavy, requiring precision and trust, makes it the ideal breeding ground for covert instruction. A written spell, once performed, leaves evidence. A potion, once consumed, vanishes into the body. In Goblet of Fire, we see how Barty Crouch Jr., disguised as Mad-Eye Moody, uses Polyjuice Potion over the course of an entire year to fool the entire school, including Dumbledore himself. That deception relied not only on Crouch's knowledge, but also on access to ingredients that only someone like Snape could store and prepare. The implications are clear. With potions, it's not just knowledge, it's access. And Snape controlled both. Snape's copy of Advanced Potion Making in Half-Blood Prince offers another unsettling clue. The handwritten notes in the margins, the Half-Blood Prince's own improvements, reveal a mind deeply versed in experimentation, unafraid of pushing boundaries. Harry learns spells like Sectum Sempra invented by Snape, capable of slashing enemies open without warning. If such violent innovations were scribbled into a student textbook, what deeper, more dangerous inventions lived in Snape's mind, unrecorded and unshared except in whispers to chosen students? The book fell into Harry's hands by accident. But what if other Slytherins had inherited earlier versions, annotated under Snape's guidance? Take a moment to consider the magical hierarchy within the Slytherin common room. Students like Malfoy wielded disproportionate influence, bolstered by wealth and blood status. But what elevated them further was implicit support from Snape. In Order of the Phoenix, when the Inquisitorial Squad is formed, Malfoy is empowered to dock points and enforce order, a dangerous precedent. Did Snape contribute to their dominance by feeding them advanced knowledge? We know he shielded them from consequences. When Harry confronted Malfoy in Half-Blood Prince, after discovering him weeping in the bathroom, the aftermath was a brutal duel that nearly ended Malfoy's life. Snape's reaction was not only immediate, but deeply personal. He did not just heal Malfoy. He hunted down the source of the spell, suspecting Harry. Would he have reacted the same way if a Gryffindor had been hurt? One of the most chilling possibilities lies in Snape's private tutoring. Though no such lessons are confirmed in the text, there are multiple suggestions of Slytherin students spending extra time under his wing. He is seen consistently in their company, rarely reprimanding them, and often defending them with an intensity that goes beyond ordinary house loyalty. The truth may be simpler than conspiracy comms or more terrifying. Snape had favourites, and those favourites may have received knowledge the rest of the school was denied. Number 17. Why are Slytherins so bad at teamwork? In the dim candlelight of the Hogwarts dungeons, the green and silver banners of Slytherin hung like silent sentinels, watching over generations of witches and wizards trained to be cunning, ambitious, and above all, resourceful. Salazar Slytherin, the founder himself, prized those who could use any means to achieve their ends, and among his core values lay one particularly curious expectation: the ability to forge and exploit connections. Not merely make friends, but build alliances, manipulate social networks, and climb higher on the backs of others. Yet time and again we see Slytherins acting not like coordinated tacticians, but isolated competitors, fractured and driven by personal gain, their unity more illusion than reality. The most glaring example of this contradiction comes during the Battle of Hogwarts. As students and professors rallied to defend the castle, and Gryffindors, Hufflepuffs, and Ravenclaws stood together in defiance, Slytherin students were the only ones to flee en masse. "And what if we want to stay and fight?" Pansy Parkinson shouted, only to be silenced by raised wands. While some individual Slytherins did return, notably Slugghorn and Zabini, the house as a whole displayed no coordinated response, no unified stand, no strategy. The moment called for leadership and loyalty to a greater cause, but Slytherin's internal culture had hollowed out those values in favor of fear, hierarchy, and self-preservation. Even in their smaller interactions, this dysfunction is visible. On the Quidditch field, the Slytherin team often wins, not because of exceptional teamwork, but through brute force and intimidation. Their strategy rarely reflects mutual trust or tactical cohesion. During the 1991 Gryffindor-Slytherin match, it is mentioned that Marcus Flint charged at Katie Bell with his club out, not bothering with finesse or setup. It's a team that plays not together but beside one another, each player chasing personal glory or executing a directive from a singular, dominant captain. There's no synergy, only alignment under pressure. The pattern extends into the classroom, too. In potions lessons under Snape, where Slytherins are often given an implicit advantage, we still do not see them collaborating meaningfully. Instead, competition defines their ethos. They hoard knowledge, they sabotage rivals. When Hermione creates the perfect shrinking solution in her third year, Slytherins do not respond with curiosity or alliance, but envy and scorn. In a house supposedly built on the value of connections, mutual elevation is surprisingly absent. The connections Slytherins favour are vertical, not horizontal. They climb up, not out. Draco Malfoy's social orbit illustrates this failure keenly. Though surrounded by Crabbe, Goyle, Pansy and others, Draco does not cultivate a team so much as a circle of followers. Crabbe and Goyle act more like bodyguards than partners. They grunt and obey, but they are never entrusted with complex tasks. Even when Draco is given the critical mission to assassinate Dumbledore, he shoulders the burden alone, refusing to confide in even his closest allies. The failure is stark. Slytherins don't work as a team because they are conditioned to trust no one fully, only to dominate or obey. This dynamic originates perhaps in their very selection process. The Sorting Hat tells us, and power-hungry Slytherin loved those of great ambition. Ambition, while valuable, is inherently individualistic. Unlike Gryffindor's courage, which often requires sacrifice for others, or Hufflepuff's loyalty, which binds individuals into a whole, ambition fractures. It sets people on parallel paths that may intersect but rarely merge. The drive to be the best eclipses the desire to build something together. In Slytherin, the ladder to success has room for one. And yet the irony deepens when we recall how Slytherins are reputed to wield influence in the wizarding world. Ministerial positions, corporate power, media control, these are roles where teamwork and strategic networking are indispensable. So where then is the training? Where is the cultivation of leadership that inspires rather than commands? It seems the house teaches its students not to cooperate, but to manipulate, not to inspire, but to intimidate. The network is not built on trust, but on debt and fear, which cannot sustain a team. Tom Riddle is the quintessential Slytherin, and his life embodies this paradox. He surrounded himself with followers, yes, but never partners. The Death Eaters, for all their dramatic flair and coordination, were not a team, but a terrified cult. Riddle trusted no one. He shared no plans. Even Bellatrix Lestrange, his most fanatical devotee, was kept in the dark about Horcruxes. His leadership was effective through fear, not trust. And fear, as Dumbledore said, is the enemy of growth. Voldemort built an empire of Slytherins, and yet it crumbled because no one stood by him out of loyalty, only out of terror. Contrast this with the camaraderie of the Marauders, James Potter, Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, and Peter Pettigrew, who, despite their flaws, worked together, created the Marauders' map, and mastered Animagus transformations. Their collaboration produced real magic. Slytherin never shows such cohesion. Their legends are solitary, their triumphs individual, their failures collective. They are taught to distrust, to rise alone, to suspect vulnerability as weakness. Even Professor Snape, perhaps the most complex Slytherin of them all, embodies this principle. He conducts his double life in complete secrecy. He works alone, makes sacrifices in isolation, and never builds a team. His redemption, while profound, is a solitary act. He trusts no one with his pain, his purpose, or his plans. It is a tragedy of his house that its best member fought the greatest fight in utter loneliness because collaboration was not in the Slytherin vocabulary. There are moments, brief and flickering, when the potential for Slytherin unity emerges. Horace Slugghorn, in his own way, attempts to teach the value of a well-curated social circle. His Slug Club is built on mutual benefit, not obedience. He encourages young wizards to network, to find common goals, to lift one another. But even this is transactional. Slughorn's selections are not based on kindness or loyalty, but on fame and usefulness. It is the Slytherin creed masked in pleasantry. During Dumbledore's army sessions, not a single Slytherin joins. The idea of collective learning, shared growth, and group solidarity appears alien to them. While other houses embrace the challenge of learning together, Slytherins remain absent, physically and ideologically. They stand apart, watching, calculating, waiting to report. Theirs is not a house that joins, it is a house that infiltrates. Perhaps the very architecture of their dormitories reinforces this mindset. Tucked beneath the lake in the bowels of the castle, the Slytherin common room is distant from the light, isolated from the others, accessible only through a password-protected wall. While the Gryffindor Tower invites elevation and openness, and the Hufflepuff common room celebrates earthy hospitality, Slytherin is a place of secrecy. It encourages privacy over participation, discretion over discussion. There are no communal ideals, only ambition disguised as unity. Even the ghost of Slytherin House, the Bloody Baron, symbolizes fractured allegiance. Silent, brooding, and feared, he offers no comfort, no wisdom, no stories. Compare this to nearly headless Nick, who fosters camaraderie among Gryffindors with tales and advice. The Baron embodies isolation, and the students follow his example more than they realize. They do not reach out. They close in. Pansy Parkinson, Theodore Nott, Blaise Zabini, each presents another face of the same truth. Though they share a house, they never share purpose. Pansy mocks others for weakness. Zabini keeps aloof, suspicious of everyone. Nott drifts in intellectual superiority. None reach across the aisle, even to each other. In battles, in debates, in daily life, Slytherins fail not for lack of talent, but for lack of cohesion. And yet the problem lies not in their nature, but in their nurture. If Slytherin taught ambition in concert with empathy, if it demanded strategy built on inclusion, not subjugation, then it might become the most powerful house of all. It has the tools. What it lacks is the ethic. Until then, its students will continue to shine as individuals and stumble as collectives. In the Triwizard Tournament, Draco Malfoy is not proud that Hogwarts is represented by Cedric Diggory. He sees no house loyalty, only house rivalry. He undermines his own school's chances because the representative isn't Slytherin. This pettiness, this obsession with exclusivity, is the anti-teamwork toxin at the heart of the house. It is not competition that kills unity, it is contempt. Even during the final hours of the Second Wizarding War, when unity was the only hope, Slytherins had to be dragged into participation by outside force. They never rise as a house, they never rally. And that is the final tragic irony. The house built on connection produces the most disconnected students. Slytherin does not fail because it lacks talent. It fails because it misunderstands strength. True strength is not domination, it is synergy, it is trust, it is sacrifice. Until the dungeons echo with those lessons, the house will remain a kingdom of kings without councils, of generals without armies, and of ambition without alliance. Number 19. Why doesn't Slytherin win the House Cup after Harry arrives? Of all the peculiarities in Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, few are as glaringly unjust as the treatment of Slytherin House in the annual competition for the House Cup after Harry Potter's arrival. For 7 consecutive years before the boy who lived stepped on to platform 9 3/4, Slytherin had claimed the cup. Their dominance wasn't merely a matter of chance, it reflected their consistency, cunning, and drive for excellence. Yet from the moment Harry arrived, that pattern was shattered, and not by coincidence. Something deeper, more troubling, seems to be at work. In Harry's first year, Slytherin was once again poised to win. Their Quidditch team was powerful, their academic record was solid, their prefects held authority. Yet on the final night of the school year, after the Great Hall had already been decorated in Slytherin green, Professor Dumbledore awarded a last-minute flurry of points to Gryffindor. He gave 10 points to Neville Longbottom for standing up to his friends, tipping the scale just far enough to push Gryffindor over the edge. The decision felt theatrical, not academic. The decorations literally changed colour in front of everyone. Slytherins, who had believed they'd won fairly, were forced to sit and watch their triumph vanish. This moment wasn't isolated, it established a pattern. Year after year, Slytherin was portrayed as the antagonist house, and Gryffindor, populated by our heroes, consistently prevailed. But the metrics for victory were never transparent. Readers might recall that house points could be taken away or granted with shocking arbitrariness. In The Philosopher's Stone, Professor McGonagall docked 50 points from Gryffindor when Harry, Hermione and Neville were caught out of bed. It was the single biggest point deduction in memory. Yet in the same breath, Dumbledore could reverse that entire narrative with a handful of words. What's troubling is how this reflects on the institution. Slytherin was home to some of the most talented students. Draco Malfoy, for all his flaws, was an adept wizard. Blaise Zabini was intelligent and aloof. Pansy Parkinson was academically capable. They weren't all bullies or dark-hearted, and yet their achievements seemed to count for less in the larger story of Hogwarts life. It wasn't that they didn't do well, it was that the system was stacked against them when it mattered most. Even during events like the Triwizard Tournament, Slytherin was sidelined. Hogwarts champion Cedric Diggory came from Hufflepuff. Durmstrang's Victor Crumb and Beauxbaton's Fleur Delacour were given their own moments of glory, but no Slytherin played a role. And when the tournament went awry and tragedy struck, Slytherin's concerns, particularly those voiced by Snape, were dismissed or ignored. The narrative never paused to consider whether the Slytherins had valid reasons to feel excluded or mistrustful. The core problem lies in the way points are distributed. Professors can grant or deduct points seemingly at will without oversight. Snape, head of Slytherin, frequently awarded his own students and penalized others, as did McGonagall with Gryffindors. But the headmaster had the final word, and his word rarely favored Slytherin. In the Chamber of Secrets, even after the school faced mortal peril and Harry had broken numerous rules, the year concluded with accolades for Gryffindor. The Slytherins had adhered to protocol. They had stayed in bed. They had avoided the forbidden areas. And still, they were the villains. In The Prisoner of Azkaban, the Quidditch Cup became Gryffindor's. Harry caught the snitch in a brutal, rain-swept match, overcoming tremendous odds. But what about Slytherin's tactical plays? Their team, captained by Marcus Flint, had dominated the league for years. Their strategy was harsh but effective. No acknowledgement was ever made of their effort or record. When Gryffindor finally won, the whole school erupted, and the Slytherins became, once more, the losers in a rigged game. Even Professor Slugghorn, a Slytherin himself, could not escape the shadow of bias. When he returned to Hogwarts in The Half-Blood Prince, he was portrayed as eccentric and self-serving, collecting talented students like trophies. Yet when Dumbledore did the same with Harry, lavishing him with attention and private lessons, it was seen as mentorship. The same behavior, judged differently depending on house alignment, it reinforced the notion that Slytherins were suspect by default. Consider the final year, the battle for Hogwarts. It was the culmination of everything the houses had prepared for. Yet when Voldemort arrived and the students were given the chance to fight, Slytherins were accused of cowardice. McGonagall ordered them to the dungeons, no evidence, no trial, just punishment. Later, we learn that some Slytherins returned to fight, but the damage was done. The official narrative had cast them out once more. This isn't just unfair, it's demoralizing. Imagine being a Slytherin student in those years, working hard, studying late, competing in Quidditch, earning points in potions class, and then watching every bit of that effort swept aside because of someone else's narrative, because your house was no longer fashionable, because the boy who lived had to win, and your achievements were inconvenient. It's telling that the points were never made public in real time. Students didn't receive updates. There was no scoreboard that could be verified, no transparency, only the final tally at the feast, and even that could change in a moment. As when Dumbledore awarded Harry and friends a last-minute surge of points for breaking the rules, because it was for a good cause. These choices echo a deeper problem, the binary morality that Hogwarts enforces. Gryffindor is brave, Slytherin is cunning. One is good, one is suspect, but that's a shallow view of humanity. Courage without wisdom can be reckless. Cunning with compassion can save lives. Yet Hogwarts rarely allowed for that nuance. Instead, it divided children into houses at age 11 and judged them accordingly for 7 years. Slytherin's legacy is complicated, yes, but not evil. Merlin himself was a Slytherin. So was Horace Slugghorn. So was Severus Snape, a man who gave his entire life to protect a child he once despised. Yet how often are these examples mentioned to students? Instead, they hear stories of Voldemort, of Death Eaters, of Draco's arrogance. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Treat children like villains, and they may start to act accordingly. And it isn't only Slytherin who suffers. The entire school loses when one house is systematically diminished. Inter-house unity becomes impossible. Suspicion festers, friendships fracture. Even Harry, Ron, and Hermione rarely interact with students outside Gryffindor, save for antagonism. What might Hogwarts have looked like if Slytherins and Gryffindors collaborated? If competition had been fair? Even the Sorting Hat warned of this. In The Goblet of Fire, it sang, "Though different they are, they're all the same inside." A plea for unity, yet no structural change followed. No inter-house dormitories, no shared classes by default. Instead, the same four-house system persisted, reinforcing rivalry, distrust, and inequality. This isn't just a literary flaw, it's a moral contradiction. If the story teaches us that people can change, that bravery comes in many forms, then why does the system at Hogwarts punish ambition? Why does it reward rule-breaking only when done by Gryffindors? Why is Slytherin never allowed to win, except in the shadows? The truth may be that Slytherin simply became a casualty of narrative convenience. Rowling needed clear villains and clear heroes, and in the absence of nuance, Slytherin was sacrificed. But for readers who care about fairness, about balance, this rings false. It suggests that no matter how hard you work, the outcome may still hinge on someone else's story arc. In the end, this raises uncomfortable questions. Was the House Cup ever real? Or was it just another trophy to reinforce the chosen hero's path? If Dumbledore could award or withdraw points at will, what hope did the other houses have? What justice could exist in such a system? And perhaps that is the darkest irony of all. In a world of magic, where fairness should be enhanced, not undermined, Hogwarts taught its children that perception outweighs merit. That loyalty matters more than truth, and that if you were sorted into the wrong house, you might spend 7 years being punished for someone else's narrative. Number 20. Why are there no strong female leaders in Slytherin? In the dim, emerald-hued corridors of the Slytherin common room, power has always walked with a swagger. The portraits on the walls reflect cold ambition, and the candlelight casts shadows long enough to swallow lesser students whole. But in the gallery of Slytherin greatness there is a glaring emptiness, a void where ambitious, sharp-minded girls should have stood. Instead, the spotlight seems constantly tilted toward boys in tailored black robes, their names whispered with both reverence and fear. Draco Malfoy, Theodore Nott, Blaise Zabini, Vincent Crabbe, Gregory Goyle. Again and again, the narrative of Slytherin's strength is carried by male voices, while their female counterparts fade into the background like the green silk curtains that shroud the dormitory windows. Pansy Parkinson, the one girl who is granted any significant presence, is hardly portrayed as a leader. Described in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix as having a face like a pug, she is framed not as a strategist or an inspiration, but rather as a gossipy hanger-on to Draco Malfoy. Her defining trait is her obsessive crush on him. She does not command respect, she clings to it, feeding off the influence of others instead of cultivating her own. When Slytherin needs to act, it is Draco who speaks, Draco who leads, and Pansy who snickers at his shoulder. Her influence, such as it is parasitic, not the kind of independent power that we see in Hermione Granger or even Luna Lovegood. This imbalance is not merely a narrative oversight. It exposes a deep structural issue in the portrayal of Slytherin House. Where are the cunning girls with master plans? Where are the silver-tongued tacticians, the serpent-hearted prodigies with ambition and poise? If Slytherin is the house of ambition, as the Sorting Hat reminds us, Or perhaps in Slytherin you'll make your real friends. Those cunning folks use any means to achieve their ends. Why does this trait appear so male-coded in practice? Even the unnamed Slytherin girls are given little room to breathe. Daphne Greengrass, a pureblood with the right pedigree and the right last name, is nothing more than a footnote. Millicent Bulstrode is reduced to brute force and a cat's hair in Hermione's polyjuice accident. Tracy Davis exists solely on class lists. None of them are permitted the narrative space to be leaders, to scheme, to shine. It is not that there are no girls in Slytherin, it is that they are written out of power. The failure becomes more pronounced when we look at how other houses are allowed to raise female leaders. Gryffindor has Hermione Granger, the brightest witch of her age, who not only leads through intellect, but becomes the moral compass of the trio. Hufflepuff gives us Tonks, a quirky, powerful aura who breaks rules but never values. Ravenclaw has Cho Chang, the Seeker, and later Luna Lovegood, who leads by defiant individuality. Even these houses, not historically associated with cunning and power, give their girls room to inspire. In contrast, Slytherin gives us Pansy Parkinson, whose most decisive act is suggesting they hand Harry Potter over to Voldemort. Leadership in Slytherin is portrayed as a spectacle of masculine rivalry. Boys elbow each other for dominance, sneer, snub, and strut through the corridors with the confidence of political heirs. And there is an almost Roman quality to their relationships, sons of senators competing for their father's favor. The girls, meanwhile, orbit this testosterone-fueled drama like moons, never becoming planets themselves. Even within the inquisitorial squad, it is the boys, Draco, Crabbe, Goyle, who set the tone. Pansy joins, but she doesn't command, she follows. The consequences of this imbalance are not just aesthetic. It shapes how readers understand power, gender, and ambition. If the house most associated with cunning, influence, and leadership cannot produce a single female character who embodies those values positively, what are we teaching readers about who gets to lead, who gets to plot, who gets to rise? We are shown again and again that ambition in girls is either absent or unattractive, nagging, cruel, shallow. Ambitious boys are feared but respected. Ambitious girls are mocked. One could argue that Slytherin simply reflects the biases of the wizarding world. After all, this is a society where the ministry is riddled with corruption, where blood purity still dominates polite conversation, where Dolores Umbridge thrives. Perhaps the gender dynamics in Slytherin are not accidental but symptomatic. But even if that is true, even if the house mirrors systemic sexism, then why doesn't the story challenge it? Why is there no rebellious female Slytherin who manipulates the system to her favor, who uses her beauty or her brilliance or her bloodline to climb and dominate? Consider a hypothetical Slytherin girl, let's call her Céline Rosier, descended from the sacred 28, with Vila charm and a mind like a steel trap. She reads Machiavelli in third year. She tutors younger students in potions, not out of kindness, but to plant seeds of loyalty. She compliments professors strategically and memorizes the preferences of the fat friar to curry favor with the ghosts. In another house, she might be called manipulative. In Slytherin, she would be revered. And yet she does not exist in the pages of canon. Instead, we get a hallway of male legacy. Even the older generation of Slytherins, Severus Snape, Lucius Malfoy, Regulus Black, Tom Riddle, are all men. The gender bias is so deeply embedded that we never even wonder why Voldemort's inner circle has no influential women beyond Bellatrix Lestrange, who is less a leader than a lunatic. Bellatrix, with her unhinged cackling and romantic devotion to Voldemort, is a caricature of feminine power, obsessive, violent, unstable. Not a strategist, not a mentor, not a ruler. In a world of magic, where gender should mean less than wandwood, this is not a small failure. It is a storytelling decision repeated over and over again until it calcifies into canon. And once something becomes canon, in a world like Harry Potter's, it becomes truth for millions of readers. The absence of Slytherin women in leadership roles isn't just a hole in representation, it's a void where countless girls might have seen their ambition mirrored and validated. Imagine if Daphne Greengrass had been the one to lead the Slytherins in the final battle. Imagine her organizing a shadow network within the house, collecting information, working quietly to protect students while outwardly keeping favor with the Carrows. Imagine her choosing strategy over swordplay, but with equal impact. How different the final chapters of Hogwarts would feel. But instead, Slytherin is evacuated en masse, its students portrayed as cowards or villains, with no female voice raised in dissent. Even Professor Slugghorn, a Slytherin himself and a character with enormous social influence, surrounds himself with male protégés. He praises Harry, invites Cormac McLaggen, collects talent like a curator, but always with a subtle gender filter. When Slughorn hosts his Slug Club parties, the most important guests are male. Hermione is invited, yes, but not cultivated. Ginny is admired, but not mentored. There is no Slytherin girl at those gatherings who represents the next generation of leadership. It is a cruel irony that the house most often associated with feminine traits, subtlety, seduction, manipulation, completely neglects to empower its girls. Ambition without action is decoration, cunning without agency is a cage, and Slytherin, for all its ambition, seems content to keep its daughters behind green velvet curtains, silent, supportive, or scorned. We see girls like Astoria Greengrass mentioned only in footnotes. She marries Draco Malfoy and becomes the mother of Scorpius, but her legacy is domestic. Her intelligence, her Slytherin instincts, if she had any, are not explored. She becomes a name attached to a lineage. Meanwhile, Draco continues to be discussed in depth, analyzed, redeemed. Even in the next generation, Slytherin women are shadows behind powerful men. The imbalance is even starker when measured against the power dynamics of the other houses. Ravenclaw's intellectualism is embodied by women. Hufflepuff's loyalty is modelled through women. Gryffindor's courage shines most brightly through a girl who punched Malfoy and faced a troll. But Slytherin's ambition is jealously guarded by boys, as though girls would dull its edge. There is no narrative logic to this. No magical law forbids girls from mastering the art of persuasion, from dominating the chessboard of power. The Sorting Hat does not sing, "Only boys in Slytherin climb to the top," and yet the story unfolds as though it had. When we think of leadership in Slytherin, we are taught to think of cruelty, swagger, and inherited privilege. But why must all these be male? Some might argue that J.K. Rowling simply did not have time to develop every character, but the omission is too consistent, too patterned to be mere oversight. It is an editorial silence that speaks volumes. In the whispering dungeon halls of Slytherin, girls were given neither a voice nor a vision. They were background characters in their own house, not because the world of magic demanded it, but because the story did. Number 21. Why doesn't Slytherin produce great good wizards? Of all the peculiarities buried within the bricks of Hogwarts Castle, few are more confounding than the lasting paradox of Slytherin House. It is a house built on ambition, resourcefulness, and cunning, qualities that in any other context would be considered key ingredients for greatness. These traits, proudly worn like armor by generations of Slytherins, should naturally produce leaders, innovators, and peacemakers. And yet, when the dust of each generation settles, Slytherin's legacy seems curiously one-sided. For every hero from Gryffindor, for every eccentric genius from Ravenclaw, for every quietly noble soul from Hufflepuff, Slytherin gives us another name tied to shadows, suspicion, or outright terror. The question looms like a ghost over the Great Lake. Where are the good Slytherins? The other houses carry their burdens, of course. Gryffindor's can be reckless, Ravenclaw's arrogant, Hufflepuff's underestimated. But only Slytherin carries the weight of moral ambiguity as a house-wide trait. This imbalance is not simply the echo of Tom Riddle's monstrous crimes. It is something older, more ingrained, more systemic. Salazar Slytherin's legacy was poisoned from the beginning by the founder's belief in blood purity, a doctrine that still leaves stains on the tapestry centuries later. Though the school has officially moved beyond such ideas, the Sorting Hat continues to honor Salazar's vision by filling the house with those who, whether consciously or not, value exclusivity, tradition, and ambition over compassion or equality. The shadow of Lord Voldemort is the most obvious blot on the Slytherin name. A boy, born Tom Marvolo Riddle, orphaned and brilliant, sorted into Slytherin with almost theatrical ease. His transformation from clever student to Dark Lord is often cited as the house's most tragic legacy. And yet it isn't just Voldemort. The Death Eaters read like a Slytherin alumni list: Bellatrix Lestrange, Lucius Malfoy, Severus Snape before his defection, even Regulus Black before his change of heart. It creates a pattern too strong to dismiss. One might argue that darkness is attracted to Slytherin like a moth to flame, or worse, that the house itself encourages such trajectories. There is a reason why in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, the Sorting Hat warns Harry that he would do well in Slytherin. The hat recognizes ambition, power, and potential in the boy. But Harry recoils in because by then, even at age 11, the cultural myth has taken hold. Slytherin equals evil. He begs not to go, and the hat relents. What's more damning is that the hat even says, "You could be great, you know, it's all here in your head, and Slytherin will help you on the way to greatness." No doubt about that. And still, Harry chooses another path, and as do countless others. One begins to wonder if the problem is not with Slytherin's values, but with the way they are shaped, rewarded, and interpreted within the walls of Hogwarts. Consider Horace Slugghorn as a rare example of a Slytherin who walks in the light. He is affable, self-interested, but not cruel. He collects talented students like trophies, not to control them, but to be near excellence. Yet even he is a compromised figure. Slugghorn is the man who first told Tom Riddle about Horcruxes. He did not do so maliciously, but his desire to please and his fear of confrontation led to catastrophic consequences. Later, he hides his memory from Dumbledore out of shame. It's telling that even the house's best-known good member still accidentally contributes to the rise of darkness. What of Merlin, the mythical wizard who reportedly wore Slytherin's colours centuries before Hogwarts even resembled the school it is today? His name is invoked often by those who defend Slytherin's potential for greatness. But Merlin exists more as a convenient exception than a role model. No stories celebrate Merlin proclaiming, "I am a Slytherin." In fact, nothing in canon confirms his character or actions align with the best modern interpretation of moral leadership. He remains a ghostly silhouette, a legend used to defend a legacy that refuses to produce its own. Ambition is not inherently dark. In the world of Muggles, ambition drives progress. It fuels invention, it inspires change, it elevates the poor, and gives power to the voiceless. But in the context of Slytherin, ambition is rarely tempered by empathy. It becomes a game of chess where other people are pawns. Consider Draco Malfoy, clever, well-connected, raised in a home that exalted Slytherin values. His arc throughout the series shows a young boy taught to seek dominance, terrified of appearing weak, and ultimately unable to follow through with the cruelty expected of him. He is not evil, but he is not heroic either. When given a chance to switch sides, he hesitates, he runs, and who could blame him? Slytherin never taught him how to be brave, only how to survive. Severus Snape is perhaps the most complicated case of all. A man whose ultimate allegiance lay with Dumbledore, whose love for Lily Potter led him to die as a double agent, manipulating the very Dark Lord he once served. His story is soaked in sacrifice, but even Snape's redemption is shrouded in bitterness. He was cruel to students, especially to those outside his house. His loyalty to Dumbledore was not born from a general love of good, but from personal guilt and obsession. Snape did heroic things, but not with a heroic heart. He is not the poster child for moral greatness. He is the poster child for conflicted, tragic loyalty, a man with Slytherin values who died a martyr but not a saint. The systemic issue lies perhaps in the environment within the dungeons of Hogwarts. Slytherins are taught early to value their own. "We Slytherins look after our own," says Slugghorn with a smile. But such exclusivity breeds contempt. It fosters a culture of silence when one's peers cross moral lines. It discourages vulnerability. When everyone around you is playing a game of influence and dominance, showing kindness becomes a liability. Where Gryffindors reward courage and Hufflepuffs reward fairness, Slytherins reward results, and results are blind to method. No student is doomed by their house. But Slytherin's track record speaks to a deeper failure. If Hogwarts is meant to raise not only the magically gifted but the morally responsible, then the school has long neglected its duty in the dungeons. The fact that no prominent Slytherin openly opposes Voldemort during his reign besides traitors and defectors is damning. The absence of resistance is itself a form of complicity. Even Regulus Black, who tried to destroy a Horcrux, kept his actions secret and died alone. No one knew to remember him until Creature spoke. The Ministry of Magic, too, reflects this imbalance. Slytherins do ascend to positions of power, but not ones celebrated for reform or justice. Fudge, though not confirmed to be a Slytherin, shares all their traits: manipulation, denial, cowardice, masked as control. Dolores Umbridge, one of the most sadistic characters in the series, is a prime example of Slytherin traits used in the service of systemic evil. Her ambition serves her alone. Her discipline is cruelty. Her cunning is weaponized. She rises through the ranks not because of vision, but because of loyalty to those who abuse power. The House of Snakes is not beyond redemption, but the redemption must be built, not assumed. For a house that prides itself on ambition, it is remarkable how few Slytherins seem interested in redefining what their house means. There is no movement, no internal reckoning, no student or teacher who proclaims proudly, "Let us change the face of Slytherin." No one steps forward to build a new legacy. The inertia is stunning. For all their ambition, few Slytherins aim to rewrite their own history. In contrast, Hufflepuff produces quiet heroes like Tonks, who died fighting for what was right. Ravenclaw gives us the sharp-witted but kind Luna Lovegood. Gryffindor, of course, offers Harry, Hermione, Neville, flawed but fearless. Their actions speak loudly, but Slytherin offers secrecy, subterfuge, and survival. Its few redemptive arcs, Snape, Regulus, perhaps even Draco, are defined by loneliness and moral ambiguity. There is power in those stories, but little light. The Sorting Hat speaks of unity every year, yet allows a system that breeds division. If ambition is to be celebrated, then it must be cultivated alongside integrity. Slytherin should be the house of strategists, not schemers, of diplomats, not demagogues. Imagine a world where the next Minister for Magic is a Slytherin who campaigns for equality, transparency, and peace. Imagine a healer who uses cunning to cure what others cannot. Imagine a Slytherin aura who infiltrates dark circles not for power, but for protection. Such figures are possible, but they remain imaginary. Even the physical location of Slytherin House feels like an omen. Its dormitory lies beneath the lake, its common room cast in green light, its walls damp and cold. It's a place that whispers secrets, not shouts them. It invites concealment. Perhaps that is why no Slytherin ever becomes the face of a revolution. Their courage is hidden, if it exists at all, and hidden courage rarely inspires others. The future of Slytherin rests not on defending its past, but on rebuilding its reputation from the ground up. The magical world desperately needs heroes who wear green with pride, not with defiance or denial, but with redefined purpose. The fact that the books give us so few such figures is not a failure of the characters, but of the world that shaped them. It is a story left untold. And that silence, more than any dark artifact, more than any whispered spell, is the real curse. of Slytherin. Number 22. Why is Slytherin's common room so isolated? The dungeons beneath the Black Lake are not merely dark, they are suffocating. The entrance to the Slytherin common room is hidden in the damp stone walls, a part of the castle no other student ever truly sees. One must whisper a password to a stretch of blank mossy stone to reveal a door that doesn't exist to the uninvited. Unlike Gryffindor's portrait hole guarded by the jovial fat lady, or the Ravenclaw tower that rewards riddles and cleverness, the Slytherin common room is invisible, not guarded, not watched, just absent. The castle itself seems to collude in its secrecy, and Hogwarts permits it without. Question. The very architecture enforces separation. Why? The effect of this design is not merely atmospheric. It sends a message. Slytherins are not to be approached. Their house, quite literally, sinks beneath the surface of the school's social waters, while Hufflepuff's common room sits near the kitchens, warm, open, and welcoming, and Ravenclaws gaze at the sky from their tower. Slytherins dwell in the depths. Their windows face the lake's eerie green, their light filtered by water. It is a deliberate, isolating placement, and it raises the question, how did the school allow this kind of physical and emotional separation to take root? During Harry's second year, the Gryffindor trio infiltrates the Slytherin common room using Polyjuice Potion. This is the only time readers or viewers see the space. A long, low underground room with rough stone walls and ceiling from which round, greenish lamps were hanging on chains. It is described as cold, shadowy, and echoing, not unlike a dungeon. Even the furniture, dark, carved, ancient, feels unwelcoming. This environment doesn't invite outsiders, it expels them. No other house appears so purposefully shrouded, so protected from visibility. In all of Hogwarts' 1,000 years, Slytherin's physical secrecy seems to have bred cultural mystery and mistrust. Gryffindors boast their bravery in portraits and trophies. Hufflepuffs radiate warmth in their golden-lit chambers. Ravenclaws practically flaunt their intelligence in open debates. But what does Slytherin exhibit? Nothing. And this vacuum becomes fertile soil for prejudice. As early as their first train ride to Hogwarts, students are warned about Slytherin. Hagrid himself, kind and brave, tells Harry, "There's not a single witch or wizard who went bad who wasn't in Slytherin." It's not just a comment, it's an indictment, and it shapes Harry's opinion before he's even met a single Slytherin. But how could he? The school offers no chances to interact with Slytherin students beyond competition and confrontation. Lessons pair Gryffindors with Slytherins in a way that only fosters rivalry. During potions, Professor Snape blatantly favors his own house. The Gryffindors, especially Harry, feel it, and resentment grows. When houses clash in Quidditch or classroom duels, Slytherins are presented not as classmates, but as adversaries. They're not even humanized. They're opponents. Hogwarts does nothing to counteract this narrative, and that silence becomes complicity. Draco Malfoy embodies this problem. Arrogant, prejudiced, and privileged, he becomes the face of Slytherin for most readers. He insults Hermione with the word mudblood, provokes Harry endlessly, and flaunts his family's wealth. But what other Slytherin do we truly get to know? Pansy Parkinson is a caricature of cruelty. Crabbe and Goyle are muscle without mind. There's no counterbalance, no Theodore Nott, no Daphne Greengrass with nuance. The house, full of students, remains a monolith of arrogance and shadows. But was it always this way? The answer lies in the founding ideals. Salazar, Slytherin himself, championed ambition, resourcefulness, and cunning. These are not inherently evil traits. In fact, they're essential to any functioning society. Yet because he also valued pure-blood heritage and eventually split from the other founders over that belief, his legacy has been twisted. Hogwarts enshrines the name Slytherin but ignores the complexity behind it. Instead of reconciling the house's dark past with modern values, the school buries it, deep, under stone, behind a hidden door, and in doing so it allows suspicion to flourish. Even the house cup is shaped by this dynamic. In Harry's first year, Slytherin is set to win. The hall is decorated in green and silver. But at the last moment, Dumbledore awards last-minute points to Gryffindor. The entire hall erupts in joy, except for the Slytherins. No one questions their disappointment. No one comforts them. The scene is iconic for readers, triumphant even, but for an 11-year-old Slytherin student who did nothing wrong, it's alienating. The message is subtle but clear. The rest of the school rejoices when you lose. Then there's the Battle of Hogwarts. As tensions rise and students must choose sides, Professor McGonagall offers the option to evacuate younger students. Pansy Parkinson demands they hand over Harry. McGonagall, furious, orders the entire Slytherin house to be sent to the dungeons, not questioned, not sorted, just locked away. An entire house is punished for one voice. The message is repeated: Slytherin cannot be trusted. Once again, isolation is enforced, not just structurally, but institutionally, and not a single teacher protests. But among Slytherin alumni are people like Severus Snape, brave, tortured, loyal, and Regulus Black, who gave his life to fight Voldemort. Horace Slugghorn, who returns to Hogwarts not out of duty but affection, is a Slytherin. These figures show that the house's traits can be channeled for good, yet their stories are rarely held up to students as counter-narratives. Dumbledore tells Harry that perhaps we sought too soon. He recognizes that people change, but the school never updates how it treats the house that bears Slytherin's name. Why does Hogwarts maintain such a closed-door policy for Slytherin? Tradition, security, or a deeper fear of what that house represents? Perhaps it is easier to hide Slytherin away than to confront its contradictions. But that approach backfires. Students like Draco are never encouraged to grow beyond their family prejudices, and students like Harry are never encouraged to challenge their assumptions. Hermione, with all her intelligence, dismisses the entire house. Ron, born into a wizarding family, loathes them. And these are the protagonists. In fourth year, the Triwizard Tournament introduces foreign students from Beauxbatons and Durmstrang. Instantly, the Slytherins gravitate toward Durmstrang's champion, Victor Krum. It's a curious choice. Krum is quiet and introspective, not a bully like Malfoy, but the alignment reinforces the image of Slytherin as foreign, elite, and exclusive. They sit together at meals, they exchange secrets, they isolate further. The very notion of inter-house unity becomes impossible when one of the houses is discouraged from forming bonds outside its own walls. The Sorting Hat itself warns of this division. In Harry's fifth year, it sings, "Though condemned I am to split you still I worry that it's wrong." The Hat sees what the school refuses to fix. The Founders' division has deepened into dysfunction. When inter-house friendships do bloom, like between Cedric Diggory and Harry, or Luna Lovegood and Neville, they're framed as rare, almost heroic. But Slytherin is never allowed such bridges. There is no public friendship between Slytherins and the other houses that the school celebrates or even acknowledges. In a world where unity is paramount, especially under the threat of Voldemort, Hogwarts fails to teach its students to look beyond house colours. The Order of the Phoenix accepts all who oppose evil, regardless of house, but the student body is trained from day one to view Slytherin as the other. The school celebrates bravery, cleverness and kindness in open sunlight, but hides ambition in the dark, and when ambition is deprived of light, it festers. The very thing Hogwarts hopes to prevent, it perpetuates. After the war, one must wonder, did anything change? Did the new generation of Slytherins grow up feeling less mistrusted? Did the school open its gates a little wider? Or did the common room remain beneath the lake, cold and unvisited by any who weren't chosen? If Hogwarts is to be a place of growth, then perhaps it's time to examine not only who the students are, but how the castle itself shapes who they become. It's not enough to say not all Slytherins are bad if the system itself isolates them from the start. There is power in visibility, when Luna dances at the wedding, when Cedric dies and Dumbledore calls him a boy who was kind and brave and true. when Neville stands alone with the sword of Gryffindor. These moments stick with us because they show character, choice, transformation. But Slytherin is denied these chances. Even when Snape's story unfolds, it happens posthumously. No student sees it, no student learns from it, and the cycle continues. The House of Ambition remains in shadow, not by nature, but by design. To break this cycle, Hogwarts must do more than sing about unity once a year. It must alter the very fabric of how it treats its houses. The entrance to Slytherin's common room should not be a secret to the world. It should be part of it. Invite Ravenclaws to share ideas. Let Hufflepuffs bring warmth. Let Gryffindors challenge Slytherin's rigidity with reckless courage. True unity is not born in battle. It is born in proximity. And until Hogwarts brings Slytherin to the surface, literally and metaphorically, the myth of their darkness will remain, not in spite of the castle, but because of it. Number 23. Why isn't empathy taught in Slytherin? There was something chilling about the way Draco Malfoy sneered at Hermione Granger when he first called her a filthy little mudblood. The venom behind the insult wasn't born out of a childish misunderstanding. It was too precise, too well rehearsed. This wasn't an innocent boy parroting what he'd heard at home. It was a student steeped in a culture where cruelty was currency and empathy was weakness. And while the rest of the school gasped, no one, not even the teachers, truly stopped to teach Draco why that word was poison. Not Snape, not Dumbledore. The moment passed, and the wound festered. The issue with Slytherin House was never just its ambition or cunning. It was the way it encouraged emotional detachment. When Neville Longbottom was hexed and left stiff as a board in the common room, when Ron Weasley lay writhing on the floor from Draco's eat slugs, curse backfiring, when Hermione was left sobbing in the bathroom after being mocked for her teeth, Slytherins laughed. The Book of Hogwarts bore silent witness to it all, but the ink never bled out morality. There were classes for dueling, strategy, and deception, but not one for compassion, no lesson on the costs of cruelty. Why? Professor Snape, head of Slytherin, showed a brand of loyalty that was exclusive, tribal, and conditional. He protected his students like a wolf guards its pack, not because they were right, but because they were his. He never called out Draco's bullying. He humiliated Neville for sport. He favoured Slytherin so openly it became farcical. Yet even in his sternest moments, he never offered moral redirection, never sat a student down to ask why they found joy in another's pain. His authority could have been a tool for emotional education. Instead, it became a shield behind which Slytherins were taught to survive, not to feel. Slugghorn, though warmer in demeanour, wasn't much better. His fondness was reserved for those he deemed exceptional. He collected students like trophies, noting their pedigree, their potential, their polish. He smiled and laughed, but he did not teach values. When Draco spiraled into anxiety in his 6th year, when the pressure of Voldemort's task hollowed his eyes, Slughorn turned away. Not out of malice, but out of selective attention, the kind that nurtures gifts, but not souls. Even Dumbledore, wise and all-seeing, failed to plant seeds of empathy in the one house that needed it most. What Slytherin students lacked was not intelligence or potential, it was guidance in feeling. The curriculum sharpened their minds but never softened their hearts. They were praised for cleverness, for ambition, for survival. But what about remorse? When did any Slytherin face an ethical inquiry into their behaviour? When did the school make it mandatory to sit with the pain they caused? Other houses learned community through shared values. Gryffindors were told to be brave for others. Hufflepuffs were told to be loyal beyond comfort. Ravenclaws explored knowledge not as power, but as understanding. Slytherins were told to win. The absence of structured emotional teaching became clearest in times of crisis. When the basilisk roamed the school and students were petrified, most Slytherins displayed no concern. They speculated, they gloated. "You'll be next, mudbloods," Malfoy whispered with a smile. It wasn't just him. There was a culture, an atmosphere, that allowed it, that cultivated it. Fear wasn't soothed, it was weaponized. In that moment, the true failure wasn't just the boys whispering threats, it was the silence of authority figures who allowed it to go unchallenged. No group discussion, no reflection, no adult stepped forward to say, "This is wrong." By third year, even Hagrid, a gentle soul with a giant's heart, was mocked by the Slytherins for his teaching methods and background. "Oh, beast!" and worse were murmured across tables. When Buckbeak was sentenced to death, only Harry, Hermione and Ron seemed to care. The Slytherins smirked at the loss. Again, no faculty member intervened to explain why belittling grief was a form of emotional violence. They were taught care of magical creatures, but never care of magical souls. The lessons were too often about external mastery. Internal reckoning was neglected. The behavior wasn't innate, it wasn't genetic, it was institutional. The Sorting Hat, in its own rhymed wisdom, admitted that Slytherins were misunderstood. But understanding requires effort, especially from teachers. If Draco, Pansy, Blay and others had been taught to see their peers not as rivals or inferiors, but as humans, if their curriculum had included exercises in compassion, how different would their stories be? Would Draco have cried in the bathroom, wand shaking in his hand, if someone had taught him earlier that it was okay to feel, to question, to empathize? Even the Battle of Hogwarts revealed the consequences of years without moral scaffolding. When McGonagall evacuated Slytherin first, it was because their allegiance was uncertain, not because they were evil, but because they were unanchored, no emotional loyalty to the school, no collective identity built on shared moral values. They were a house adrift, tethered only to survival, and yet no one ever blamed the system. The individuals, yes, the house, often. But the adults who could have built empathy into the foundations? They were spared scrutiny. Hogwarts taught spells, not virtues. There's something deeply unsettling about how easily cruelty was normalized. In 5th year, when Umbridge took over, many Slytherins assisted her. Not because they believed in justice, but because it gave them power. There was no resistance within the house, no inner protest from students who said, "This isn't right." They sat with her, obeyed her, benefited from her reign. A generation of students trained to think of advantage, not of consequences. And still, no educator addressed the root. No lesson titled The Cost of Power, no required reading on compassion in leadership. Even in the final moments of the series, Slytherin's redemption was left ambiguous. While individual members made noble choices, like Slugghorn returning to fight, or Narcissa lying to Voldemort to protect Harry, the house as a whole was never shown rethinking its core values. There was no turning point where they collectively said, we were wrong. No apology, no restorative moment. And perhaps that was Rowling's point. Institutions rarely confront themselves. But shouldn't someone have tried? Shouldn't Dumbledore, with all his emphasis on love, have done more than trust that time would heal what he let fester? There are names that haunt the books: Bellatrix Lestrange, Tom Riddle, Lucius Malfoy, all products of Slytherin, all seduced by dominance and contempt. And yet, no one in their early years pulled them aside and asked, "What pain are you hiding? What do you fear? Why do you lash out?" Emotional literacy was absent. Hogwarts, in its grandeur, assumed moral development was a byproduct of education. But it isn't. It's a discipline, and if not taught, it withers. What's the point of knowing how to brew a love potion if you don't understand how to love? In contrast, Harry's growth was shaped not just by danger, but by exposure to empathy. He saw it in Hermione's advocacy, in Dobby's devotion, in Mrs. Weasley's maternal warmth. He learned right and wrong, not just from books, but from experience. Slytherins were often denied that exposure. They were insulated, reinforced by their own echo chamber, and because they weren't challenged emotionally, their cruelty became habitual. They weren't evil. They were unexamined. Left to self-define, they chose the mask of pride, over the mirror of humility. Even Voldemort's rise was a study in emotional neglect. Tom Riddle was brilliant, but he was never loved, and when he arrived at Hogwarts he was sorted into a house that didn't teach him how to mend that fracture. He was taught ambition, secrecy, mastery, but never healing. Slugghorn admired him, Dumbledore feared him, but no one tried to truly connect. To teach him that feeling pain wasn't weakness, that hurting others didn't ease your own, that cruelty doesn't create power, it creates voids. That was the lesson Slytherin lacked. And yet Slytherin had potential. Severus Snape, for all his flaws, showed what loyalty and sacrifice looked like. Regulus Black found redemption. Even Draco, in his quiet hesitation, proved capable of change. But none of them changed because of Hogwarts. They changed despite it. Their arcs were solitary, unmentored. What if those transformations had been nurtured earlier? What if every Slytherin was required to spend a week shadowing a Muggleborn, to write a reflection on injustice, to volunteer in Hogsmeade during recovery efforts? Not as punishment, but as curriculum. The wizarding world feared Slytherin because it didn't understand it. But the real danger was never the children. It was the vacuum, the absence of ethical architecture, the lack of deliberate teaching about dignity, justice, and kindness. In a world where magic could heal wounds, the deeper ones, those of the heart and soul, were left untreated. And it begs the question, how many more dark wizards must rise before Hogwarts asks not just what students can do, but who they are becoming? Even the other houses were complicit in their silence. Gryffindors mocked Slytherins, Ravenclaws ignored them, Hufflepuffs distrusted them. But no one reached across the aisle, no student-led alliances, no inter-house empathy circles, no house unity projects. Divided by colour and tradition, empathy was sacrificed on the altar of identity. And perhaps that was the final lesson Hogwarts failed to teach. That love is not just personal, it's political. That compassion isn't weakness, it's resistance. It would have taken so little, a seminar, a conversation, a story shared across house lines, a letter from a Muggleborn to a pureblood describing the fear of exclusion, a Slytherin girl confessing that she hated being cruel but didn't know how to stop, an older student telling a younger one, you don't have to become what others expect. These were the real spells, the ones that could have changed hearts, but they were never taught, and so history repeated itself. There are ghosts at Hogwarts, not just of those who died, but of opportunities missed. Every cold glance, every cruel word unchallenged, every lesson plan that prioritized prestige over peace. Slytherin remains a house of shadows, not because it was doomed to be, but because no one lit a candle. And perhaps one day, someone will. Perhaps a future head of house will start the year, not with a speech about ambition, but with a question. Who will you choose to become? Until then, the dungeon stays dark. Number 24. Why is a snake the house symbol? The snake slithered into the heart of Hogwarts long before Harry Potter first laid eyes on its shifting staircases and talking portraits. It coiled itself around the name of Salazar Slytherin, a founder cloaked in suspicion, and never let go. While Gryffindor basks in the glow of a lion's courage, Ravenclaw soars on eagle's wings of intellect, and Hufflepuff plods loyally alongside a humble badger, Slytherin strikes with the imagery of a snake, a creature long burdened by mankind's oldest fears. And so the question rises like mist in the Forbidden Forest. Why, in a world that lauds bravery, wisdom, and loyalty, did one of Hogwarts' most influential founders choose a symbol associated for centuries with venom, betrayal, and death? The contradiction is glaring. From the Bible's serpent in Eden to medieval bestiaries that labeled snakes as servants of the devil, the cultural baggage carried by serpents is undeniable. Even in Muggle society, a snake is a harbinger of danger, yet this was the very creature that Salazar Slytherin selected to represent the qualities he prized most: ambition, cunning, resourcefulness, and determination. In The Philosopher's Stone, the Sorting Hat sings of Slytherin's virtues, describing how he taught those whose ancestry is purest, yet it omits any clarification of why his house must bear the image of an animal that so clearly alienates. Even within the school, students often equate Slytherins with danger. "There's not a single witch or wizard who went bad who wasn't in Slytherin," Ron Weasley says in the first book, revealing how entrenched this association has become. The snake doesn't merely represent Slytherin, it defines it. The house's entrance is hidden behind a wall in the dungeons, which opens only when the password is spoken in Parseltongue. This alone isolates the house from the others. Parseltongue, the language of snakes, is so rare and feared that when Harry inadvertently speaks it during the Chamber of Secrets, he is ostracized by much of the student body. Even Professor Flitwick and Madame Pomfrey look at him with unease. The ability is perceived as dark, untrustworthy, and almost unnatural. That a house's defining trait hinges on a talent so maligned paints it not as a sanctuary of gifted individuals, but as a crypt for the dangerous and unknown. Salazar Slytherin himself remains a mystery, though his legacy is tainted with radical views. His demand that Hogwarts teach only pure bloods was ultimately what led to his departure from the school. A man whose ideals were considered too extreme, even for his contemporaries, chose a symbol that mirrored his isolation and defiance. The snake, a creature often associated with treachery, fits too neatly into the image of a man willing to build a secret chamber, hide a basilisk within it, and wait for a true heir to finish his work. Even the language he used to command the beast was not common Latin or English, but Parseltongue, the hissing, whispering tongue of serpents. Yet the association becomes even more problematic when examining how students are affected by it. Children sorted into Slytherin are often judged not by their actions but by their emblem. Draco Malfoy, though raised with elitist views, is not a murderer, but the snake on his robes brands him as the enemy from the beginning. It is not his behavior, but his house affiliation that draws Harry's ire. In the Goblet of Fire, Draco mocks Harry in front of the Beauxbatons girls, but his cruelty feels almost expected. It is as though the snake gives him permission to strike without consequence. No one is surprised. It's what snakes do. The symbol also shapes how Slytherins see themselves. From childhood, they are taught that their identity is wrapped around the qualities of ambition and cunning, but those terms quickly warp into ruthlessness and deceit. Pansy Parkinson does not hesitate to mock Hermione or cheer on injustice. Crabbe and Goyle follow Malfoy with brute stupidity, yet their sense of superiority stems less from personal merit and more from the image of the snake coiled on their ties. Even Professor Snape, perhaps the most morally complex character in the series, finds himself forced to navigate between the demands of loyalty and the reputation of the house he leads. In The Half-Blood Prince, his struggle to protect Draco, while upholding a facade of cruelty, reflects this internal battle between symbolism and substance. But the snake is not inherently evil. In other cultures, serpents are symbols of transformation, wisdom, and healing. In ancient Greek mythology, the Ouroboros, the snake that eats its own tail, is a symbol of eternity. In India, serpents guard treasures and holy places. The staff of Asclepius, with its single snake curled around it, remains the international symbol of medicine. It is possible, even likely, that Slytherin intended the snake to reflect these more nuanced qualities. Perhaps he saw ambition not as selfishness, but as a means of continual growth. Perhaps his belief in purity of blood was, in his eyes, a misguided form of preserving magical heritage, not of enforcing superiority. Yet such readings are drowned out by the louder, more malevolent interpretation the snake invites. Even the location of the Slytherin common room reinforces the house's otherness. Unlike the warm, lion-emblazoned tower of Gryffindor or the airy, book-filled eyrie of Ravenclaw, Slytherin dwells beneath the lake, its windows looking into green-tinged water. In The Half-Blood Prince, We see this world for the first time, a place of low light and stone walls where mermaids float past and secrets linger in the shadows. It is cold, silent, and alienating. A snake would be comfortable here, curling between rocks, unseen by the world above. But children are not snakes, and expecting them to thrive in this atmosphere of suspicion and solitude seems cruel, even deliberate. The most damning evidence of the symbol's weight comes in the Deathly Hallows. When the Battle of Hogwarts looms, the students of Slytherin are the only ones not invited to stay and fight. Professor McGonagall sends them away, stating, "There is nothing Slytherin House can contribute to this battle. It is a devastating judgment, not on individuals, but on an entire house." Though it is later revealed that some Slytherins did return to fight, the moment underscores how deeply the snake has embedded itself in the collective psyche of the wizarding world. Even in the fight against Voldemort, a Slytherin gone monstrous, the house is not redeemed, but removed. And Voldemort himself is the snake's ultimate consequence. Born Tom Riddle, he was intelligent, talented, and charismatic, traits the Sorting Hat might admire in any student. But his Slytherin heritage, his discovery of Parseltongue, and his obsession with blood purity formed the foundation of his ideology. In the Chamber of Secrets, the image of a giant snake slithering through the pipes of the school becomes a metaphor for the house's hidden danger. The serpent is not merely a mascot, it is a shadow beneath the surface, an echo of Slytherin's unfinished dream. Ironically, the very trait that might have been Slytherin's strength, ambition, is undone by the weight of the symbol. In seeking greatness, his house becomes synonymous with villainy. Students sorted into Slytherin may arrive with dreams of leadership and change, only to be steered toward secrecy and mistrust. The symbol limits them before they can grow. While Neville Longbottom blossoms in Gryffindor, finding courage in unlikely places, many Slytherins remain stagnant, bound by a legacy they cannot escape. It is not that the snake is unworthy of admiration. In nature, snakes are survivors. They move silently, strike with precision, and shed their skin to evolve. These qualities mirror the adaptive genius of many Slytherins. Regulus Black, for example, turned against Voldemort and died to protect the world from darkness. He was brave, resourceful, and loyal to his brother, to his house, to the truth. But his redemption is lost in the noise of the snake's hiss. Even Merlin, the legendary sorcerer, was a Slytherin. His name alone could have uplifted the house's image, yet the curriculum of Hogwarts barely mentions him. Instead, Slytherin is taught through the lens of its worst product, Lord Voldemort. The school and the world it reflects rarely give students the chance to imagine their house as a place of transformation rather than toxicity. If the snake had been allowed to symbolize wisdom, strategy, or rebirth, the entire house might have taken a different course through history. Slytherin's potential is not in question, its downfall is symbolic. The founders chose animals that reflected their ideals, but while the lion, eagle, and badger were easy to love, the snake was already burdened. That burden became prophecy. With every student who joined the house, the serpent's shadow grew longer, darker. It stopped being a creature of mystery and became a symbol of menace. And as long as it coils on green and silver banners, it whispers a warning not just about Slytherin, but about how symbols can define fate. Had Salazar Slytherin chosen a hawk or even a fox, the narrative might have changed. Cunning and ambition do not require venom to thrive. But the snake is a creature that demands interpretation, and too often the worst one wins. In choosing it, Slytherin ensured that his house would always walk the edge between greatness and infamy. There is tragedy in that choice. The children who wear the serpent are not evil, but they inherit its reputation, and reputation is a cage as tight as any curse. Perhaps in the end, the snake was not meant to be a warning, but a challenge. To see beyond the skin, beyond the fangs, to find the wisdom in the hiss, and to shed the burden of fear. But in a world that judges so quickly, it is a challenge that most never get the chance to meet. Number 25. Why don't Slytherin students ever change or evolve? Of all the houses at Hogwarts, Slytherin remains the most curiously static. While Gryffindors, Hufflepuffs and Ravenclaws are afforded moments of doubt, transformation, and even redemption, Slytherins often exist in a vacuum, locked into the same character molds from their first appearance to their final bow. Draco Malfoy begins as a spoiled, sneering antagonist, and though he wavers slightly during the war, he ends where he started, distant, privileged, resentful. There is a flicker of hesitation in him during Half-Blood Prince when faced with the task of killing Dumbledore, but even that moment, powerful as it is, leads not to transformation, but retreat. He doesn't reject Voldemort or his ideology, he simply fails. To become a killer. Is that really growth or merely a pause in his descent? In contrast, look at Neville Longbottom. Introduced as a bumbling, timid boy with a broken wand and worse self-esteem, he becomes the man who stands up to Voldemort in Deathly Hallows, drawing the sword of Gryffindor from the Sorting Hat and slaying Nagini, the final Horcrux. His transformation is not just dramatic, it's complete. He evolves through fear, friendship, courage, and pain. Yet no Slytherin undergoes anything even remotely similar. Blaise Zabini remains an aloof, beautiful cynic to the very end. Pansy Parkinson, remembered most for her shrill demand to hand Harry over to Voldemort, is left without redemption or depth. Even Vincent Crabbe and Gregory Goyle are cast more as furniture than individuals. Hulking, sneering, monosyllabic bodyguards who ultimately destroy themselves. J.K. Rowling writes complex transformations for many characters. Percy Weasley betrays his family and returns ashamed. Dudley Dursley goes from abusive bully to a boy who mutters a shy, awkward thank you. Even Kreacher, the embittered house elf, softens when shown respect. These arcs are not accidental, they are deliberate, designed to show the possibility of change, of redemption. And yet the students of Slytherin House are never given the same latitude. Their destinies seem etched in stone. Why? One possibility lies in the way the narrative itself frames Slytherin. The first book paints it ominously from the outset. There's not a single witch or wizard who went bad who wasn't in Slytherin, says Hagrid in Philosopher's Stone. The statement is blatantly untrue. Peter Pettigrew, a traitor to his friends and murderer, was in Gryffindor. Yet it sets the tone for how readers view the house. Slytherins are the other, the villains. They're ambitious, cunning, and resourceful, traits that ought to allow for enormous emotional range. But instead they become caricatures of evil, ambition weaponized into cruelty. The Sorting Hat itself warns of this dangerous dichotomy. In Order of the Phoenix, it sings, "Though condemned I am to split, you all into houses four. Still I fear I'm getting worried, that you're drifting more and more." The Hat recognizes that dividing students by traits entrenches them. Slytherins, surrounded by others who value blood purity and dominance, may never see another way. The system is built to echo and reward their worst instincts. When the school isolates Slytherins rather than challenging them, it creates a bubble, one where change feels not just improbable, but impossible. Look at Pansy Parkinson again. She's often written as a gossip, a snob, and a petty bully. In Half-Blood Prince, she's described as clinging to Draco's arm and giggling at his taunts. There's no effort to reveal her inner life, no scene that asks us to understand her pain, her family, her fears. Compare that to even Lavender Brown, who is introduced as a comic foil but is allowed grief, romances, and eventually death. Pansy, on the other hand, ends the series by demanding that Harry be turned over to Voldemort. The text does not revisit her. There is no reckoning, no redemption, only silence. Crabbe and Goyle fare no better. They are living shadows, fists without minds. In Deathly Hallows, Crabbe, attempting to kill Harry, sets off the fiendfire that ultimately consumes him. It's his only independent decision in 7 books, and it kills him. Goyle survives, but with nothing. No remorse, no growth, no future. The choice to leave these characters stagnant feels purposeful, but narratively unbalanced. Were they truly incapable of questioning their allegiance, or did the story simply refuse them the chance? Rowling makes space for redemption in unexpected places. Severus Snape, himself a Slytherin, is the lone exception. A man whose bitterness masks lifelong penance. Yet even his transformation is framed in silence and secrecy. Harry forgives him in the end, naming a child after him, but we never see Snape forgive himself. His redemption is posthumous, buried under years of cruelty. He is not a model of transformation, he is a cautionary tale. His love for Lily is his only spark of light, and even that is tainted by obsession and regret. What's most frustrating is that the story hints more than once that Slytherins are capable of more. During the Battle of Hogwarts, Professor McGonagall orders all Slytherins to leave the school after Pansy's outburst, but the implication is clear. None stay to fight. Are we really to believe that every Slytherin chose cowardice or cruelty, that not a single one hesitated? It's a narrative decision that reinforces stereotype over possibility. In contrast, even Zachariah Smith, an annoying Hufflepuff, is allowed the dignity of uncertainty. But the Slytherins are swept aside. Perhaps the problem lies in how little time we spend inside Slytherin House. We follow Harry, a Gryffindor, and his world revolves around Gryffindors. We visit their common room, their dormitories, their parties and failures. But the Slytherin common room remains a mystery, even to readers. We never hear them debate, reflect, or argue with each other. The result is a house painted in monoliths, smooth and dark and uniform. Blaise Zabini, for instance, is described as handsome and disdainful. His mother is a Black Widow figure, rumoured to have had multiple husbands die mysteriously. That's the extent of his backstory. We never hear him speak of aspirations, ethics, or conflict. What does he want? Who does he fear? The book never tells us. This pattern repeats with Theodore Nott, another Slytherin whose name is barely mentioned despite being the son of a Death Eater. He appears briefly in Half-Blood Prince, noted as thin, pale and intelligent. But nothing more. What does intelligence mean in Nott's world? Is he a reluctant heir to dark magic or a quiet resistor? We don't know. The omission isn't just narrative, it's symbolic. These boys could have been stories, but they became shadows instead. Even when Slytherins are clever or skilled, their traits are framed negatively. When Draco outsmarts Hermione in Chamber of Secrets by calling her a mudblood, the moment is horrifying. Not because he is clever, but because he weaponizes that cleverness for hate. When he devises a plan to use the Vanishing Cabinet, it's brilliant in strategy. But again, it's used in service of Voldemort. What if, just once, a Slytherin used cunning to protect someone weaker? What if ambition meant carving a new, better path? The books never explore that angle. The lack of Slytherin redemption has consequences beyond the story. In fan culture, Slytherin becomes the edgy house, appealing to readers who enjoy villainy, not complexity. It becomes a brand, a fashion, a TikTok aesthetic. But what it never becomes is nuanced, and so the stereotypes harden. Slytherins are rich, cruel, stylish, manipulative. They wear green, they hate Muggle-borns, they sulk in dungeons, the echo chamber is loud and narrow. And yet, Rowling herself insists in interviews that Slytherin is not evil. She emphasizes the house's values, ambition, resourcefulness, fraternity. But these traits, divorced from moral growth, become stagnant. They're never given the same warmth that loyalty has in Hufflepuff, or the intellectual freedom Ravenclaws enjoy. Ambition becomes scheming, fraternity becomes exclusivity, resourcefulness becomes manipulation. It's as though the house has no positive expression of its values, only the corrupted versions. There's one fleeting moment. that could have changed everything. In Deathly Hallows, Harry tells his son, Albus Severus, that Slytherin House has produced more than its share of dark wizards, but that's not why I'm telling you you might be in it. You're named for 2 headmasters of Hogwarts. One of them was a Slytherin, and he was the bravest man I ever knew. This is meant to heal the wound, to reframe Slytherin as complex, not cursed. But it comes too late. The damage has already been done. Over 7 books the pattern was established. Slytherins don't change. The tragedy isn't just that the Slytherins don't grow, it's that they weren't allowed to. When the story needed antagonists, it turned to Slytherin. When it needed obstacles, it painted them in green. When it wanted triumph, it looked elsewhere. But imagine if instead of fading into smoke, Blaise Zabini had stood with the Order. Imagine if Pansy Parkinson, sobbing in the Great Hall, realized what she had become and chose to fight. Imagine if Goyle, of all people, had tried to save Crabbe from the fire. But those stories were never written. And so Slytherin, for all its promise, remains a house of stone. Its students arrive proud, cunning, and cold, and they leave the same way. Not because they can't change, but because the story never gave them a reason to. And in the world of Harry Potter, that might be the most illogical magic of all. Number 27. Why does Slytherin teach domination instead of leadership? Salazar. Slytherin once believed that Hogwarts should be a place for the cunning, the ambitious, and the pure-blooded. That founding principle, carved deep into the very bones of the castle, has echoed through the centuries. Yet, as the years went by, that belief became warped. It is not ambition that defines Slytherin House now, but the raw pursuit of dominance. While other houses teach their students to uplift others, to lead with integrity, to inspire through intellect or kindness, Slytherin seems content to raise children who know how to climb and trample in silence. This isn't a flaw in a few students, it is a systemic failure embedded in the very culture of the house. From the very beginning of Harry Potter's exposure to Hogwarts, Slytherin was described in whispers and warnings. "There's not a witch or wizard who went bad who wasn't in Slytherin," Ron said with boyish certainty, and it was shrugged off as bias. But that observation, although crude, pointed to a deeper truth. Those who emerge from Slytherin often rise quickly and without scruples. Tom Riddle did not become Lord Voldemort in a vacuum. He was nurtured, admired, even feared by his own professors, none of whom intervened meaningfully when they saw the dark seeds he was planting. Why didn't anyone teach him the responsibility that comes with power? Why was there no guidance on how to lead with honor? Draco Malfoy was no exception. He strutted through the halls of Hogwarts, wielding his family name like a wand, more powerful than any spell. His leadership within Slytherin was never based on wisdom or courage. It was built on threats, elitism, and fear. Even in moments when he wavered, like during his 6th year, when he was tasked with killing Dumbledore, no adult within his house took him aside to offer him an alternative vision of leadership. Professor Snape protected him, yes, but not once did Snape attempt to show Draco what it meant to be more than a pawn in a larger game. There was no lesson in morality, no emphasis on the burden of choice, only silence. Other houses, by contrast, instill a sense of leadership grounded in identity. Hermione Granger, a Gryffindor, emerged as a true leader, not through dominance, but through intellect, organization, and empathy. Cedric Diggory, a Hufflepuff, led with quiet strength, uniting those around him through fairness and decency. Luna Lovegood, the dreamy Ravenclaw, inspired others simply by remaining authentically herself, offering wisdom without pretense. But who in Slytherin ever showed us leadership without manipulation? Slugghorn, perhaps the most genial Slytherin professor we see, could have been the exception. He appreciated talent, welcomed brilliance, and fostered connections across bloodlines. But even he was fixated on influence. His Slug Club, built not to mentor with integrity, but to accumulate prestige. He favored those who could become famous or powerful, not necessarily those who would become wise or good. When he hid the truth about Horcruxes, it wasn't out of concern for the world, but fear for his reputation. In Slytherin, even kindness becomes a transaction. This fixation on status and control distorts Slytherin's core identity. Leadership becomes synonymous with domination. There is no room for vulnerability, no encouragement to admit faults, no honor in collaboration unless it's part of a long con. Blaise Zabini, aloof and snide, mocked others rather than inspired them. Pansy Parkinson, so quick to follow Draco, never questioned his methods, even as he slid into darker and darker waters. And Crabbe and Goyle, they were taught to obey, not to think. This is not a house of leaders, it is a house of monarchs and their servants. What would a Slytherin curriculum look like if it included responsibility? If young witches and wizards were told that cunning can serve the common good? That ambition without conscience is merely destruction waiting to happen? The tragedy is that this could exist. There's nothing inherently evil about ambition, but it must be guided, shaped, tempered with an understanding that true power lies in restraint and service. Yet Hogwarts never offers such guidance within Slytherin's stone-walled common room. Even the Sorting Hat, that ancient judge, recognizes this problem. Those cunning folks use any means to achieve their ends, it sings. It doesn't say those wise folks or those just folks, but those willing to do anything. The Sorting Hat doesn't question that ethic, it celebrates it. No wonder the house produces leaders who mistake fear for loyalty and silence for respect. They are trained from age 11 to believe that ends justify means, that manipulation is strategy, that dominance is leadership. And it starts early. First-year Slytherins are often indoctrinated with tales of house superiority, warned against mingling too freely with other houses. They form tight-knit groups built more on suspicion than trust. The message is clear: outsiders cannot be trusted. Allies are tools, not friends. Even ambition itself is weaponized, not as a drive to improve the world, but as a hunger to control it. No one teaches them otherwise. No Slytherin adult stands before their students to say, "You must lead with honor, or you will destroy everything you touch." The books show this most starkly in the final battle for Hogwarts. As chaos descends and students prepare to fight for their school, Professor McGonagall asks the heads of houses to rally their students. And what does Professor Slugghorn do? He tries to evacuate Slytherin House entirely. The other houses stand their ground, defend their school. Slytherin is dismissed as a liability. Even when some Slytherins return to fight, like Slugghorn himself and perhaps a few others, their initial reaction speaks volumes. Their house gave them no narrative of sacrifice or responsibility. No one ever told them they were protectors too. Leadership is about more than control. It is about accountability. It is about vision, service, empathy, and sacrifice. Gryffindors are taught to lead from the front, to face danger head-on. Hufflepuffs are taught to put the needs of others first. Ravenclaws are taught to value truth and insight. But Slytherins, they are taught to win, and in that narrow obsession they lose the moral compass that makes a great leader. What would the wizarding world look like if it had more Slytherins like Andromeda Tonks who defied her family to do what was right? Even the Ministry of Magic, riddled with former Slytherins, reflects this ethical void. Cornelius Fudge refused to acknowledge Voldemort's return, not because he doubted the truth, but because accepting it would mean relinquishing control. Pius Thicknesser, another puppet under Imperius, allowed himself to become a vessel for darkness. Lucius Malfoy, with all his influence, used it not to improve society, but to protect his wealth and bloodline. Their version of leadership never involved building anything, only preserving what they already had through fear and coercion. The contrast with figures like Sirius Black is striking. Though born a Slytherin by blood, he chose Gryffindor. He chose resistance. He chose to lead not with control, but with courage. His leadership, flawed as it was, came from a desire to protect, to challenge injustice. That choice, more than any spell, shows what Slytherin could be if it had the courage to teach a different kind of strength, one rooted not in dominance, but in moral clarity. We see glimpses of what this alternative might look like in Severus Snape. A man of profound complexity, Snape ultimately becomes one of the most pivotal agents of good in the Wizarding War. But his journey is solitary. He is not mentoring young Slytherins to follow in his path. He is not teaching them to carry the weight of sacrifice. His role is buried in secrecy, shrouded in bitterness. He dies a martyr, misunderstood even by his own house. What a waste. What a loss of potential guidance for the next generation. Imagine if Hogwarts had a class called Ethical Ambition, taught by a reformed Slytherin perhaps. It would walk students through the histories of leaders who rose and fell by their choices. It would teach them that cunning without compassion leads to tyranny. That ambition must always be measured against justice. That true power is not about winning, it's about serving something greater than yourself. No such class exists, and so Slytherins graduate with full arsenals of tricks, but no map to guide their moral compass. The result is predictable. Those who rise from Slytherin often burn bridges rather than build them. They reach for power, but leave scars in their wake, and the world suffers for it. Tom Riddle was a prodigy, brilliant and charming. Had someone taught him about leadership, true leadership, perhaps he might have used his talents to heal the fractured magical world instead of destroying it. But he was never taught to lead, he was taught to win, and so he did, until he lost everything. In the end, the tragedy of Slytherin House is not that it produces villains, it is that it fails its heroes. The children who walk through those green-lit corridors are not born with evil in their veins, but they are shaped, slowly and surely, to believe that domination is their only path, that leadership must come at the cost of connection, and no one corrects them, no one teaches them that the greatest power lies not in being feared, but in being trusted. Until that changes, Slytherin will remain a house not of leaders, but of rulers, not of visionaries, but of tacticians. And the world will continue to fear its green and silver crest, not for what it is, but for what it could have been, had someone dared to teach its children the difference between ambition and tyranny. Number 28. Why is internal discrimination tolerated within Slytherin? Of all the shadows cast over Hogwarts, one of the darkest lingers quietly beneath the emerald banners of Slytherin. It is not the ambition, nor the cunning, nor even the thirst for greatness that mars the house. It is the quiet acceptance of cruelty among its own. The books speak of unity in Gryffindor, warmth in Hufflepuff, and intellectual pride in Ravenclaw. But Slytherin thrives on division, even within its own walls. There is a hierarchy carved from bloodlines and wealth, etched deep into the minds of students before they ever set foot in the common room hidden beneath the Black Lake. And most unsettling of all is how unchallenged this internal prejudice remains, as though it were an unspoken tradition silently condoned by those who should know better. Take Draco Malfoy as the clearest embodiment of this internal rot. From his very first appearance, he makes his values abundantly clear. You'll soon find out some wizarding families are better than others, Potter. You don't want to go making friends with the wrong sort. These are not just words tossed casually in the air. They are a declaration, a creed passed down from generations of elitism. Within Slytherin, Draco does not simply coexist with his peers, he reigns above them. His confidence is not born of academic or magical excellence, but of lineage. The Malfoy name alone grants him power, and he wields it like a whip. And what of the others? Blaise Zabini, whose mother is notorious for her 7 wealthy marriages, speaks disdainfully of anyone he deems unworthy. I wouldn't touch a filthy blood trader like her, would I? He sneers in reference to Ginny Weasley. His contempt does not stop at blood status. It drips with economic judgment, a deep-seated sense of superiority that places him beside Malfoy, not as a friend, but as an aristocratic equal. Crabbe and Goyle, meanwhile, serve not as friends, but as enforcers. Their loyalty is to the social order that Draco represents. They are valued for their obedience, not for any personal merit. There are Slytherins whose names we barely hear because they do not stand on noble blood. Daphne Greengrass and Millicent Bulstrode exist in the shadows of this hierarchy. Though pure-blooded, they are not Malfoy enough. Their voices are absent from the narrative, not because they lack intelligence or skill, but because they lack the approval of the house's de facto royalty. Pansy Parkinson may be accepted, but her acceptance is conditional. She echoes Draco's insults, mocks those beneath her, and maintains her rank through alliance, not power. This is not friendship, it is survival. And yet amid all this, the silence from authority is deafening. Severus Snape, the head of Slytherin, knows precisely what his students say and do. He sees how Draco walks with impunity, how Crabbe and Goyle intimidate others, how Zabini sneers at the less fortunate. And he says nothing. Or worse, he encourages it through selective blindness. When Hermione is called a filthy little mudblood, Snape dismisses it as a childish quarrel. "There's no need to call me Sir, Professor," he snaps at Harry. But to Draco he offers indulgence. His favouritism is not just academic, it is ideological. Albus Dumbledore, too, remains curiously passive. As the headmaster of Hogwarts, he must be aware of the culture within Slytherin. He knows what the Sorting Hat once warned. And power-hungry Slytherin loved those of great ambition. Yet he allows this ambition to metastasize into elitism. He preaches unity, yet permits the school's most divided house to grow increasingly hostile, not only to outsiders, but to its own. There is no intervention, no house-wide discussion, no effort to challenge the dogma of blood superiority. In a school that claims to mould character, why is one house allowed to mould arrogance instead? The classism within Slytherin is not subtle, it is systemic. It is whispered in corridors, etched into looks of disdain, and passed from one student to the next like a cursed heirloom. It is not just about muggle-borns, it's about half-bloods, blood traitors, financial status, family prestige, and alignment with the house's unofficial ideology. When students like Theodore Nott, whose father is a known Death Eater, receive a modicum of respect, it is not for their personal worth, but for the reputation that cloaks them. Conversely, any Slytherin who dares to question this system quickly finds themselves isolated. Consider Regulus Black, a name barely explored in the early books, but one loaded with significance. Born into one of the oldest pure-blood families, Regulus should have thrived in Slytherin, but even he, eventually disillusioned by Voldemort's cause, found the courage to rebel. And what became of him? Silence. No one in Slytherin mourned him. No statue, no respect. To break the code is to be erased. It is not love for one's own house that binds Slytherins together. It is fear. Fear of falling out of favour. Fear of being seen as weak. Fear of becoming the next target. And what happens to the half-bloods in Slytherin? They exist, but their presence is muted. The books mention them rarely, and when they do appear, they are never central to the Slytherin social order. This is especially troubling given that Voldemort himself was a half-blood born Tom Riddle. One would expect Slytherin to re-evaluate its obsession with blood purity, given that its most powerful alumnus was not of noble lineage. But no, even Voldemort's secret is hidden from the house that worships him. They adore the image, the legacy, not the inconvenient truth beneath it. And here lies the deepest hypocrisy. Slytherin House honours a man who, if his bloodline were known, would be scorned by the very students who chant his name. When Draco mocks Hermione for her parentage, he unknowingly condemns the same background that shaped his own idol. But no one corrects him. No one tells the truth. Even the teachers remain mute, as if admitting Voldemort's half-blood status would shatter the illusion too violently. The truth is inconvenient, and in Slytherin, illusions are safer. What is most tragic is that Slytherin students are capable of greatness, true greatness, untainted by prejudice. Andromeda Black defied her family's blood mania and raised Nymphadora Tonks with love and courage. Horace Slugghorn, another Slytherin, cherished talent above birth. He befriended Muggleborns, half-bloods and purebloods alike, selecting his favourites based on brilliance, not lineage. "You are talented, Tom. You shall go far," he once told Riddle. His flaw was not prejudice, but naivety. Yet even Slughorn, with all his charm, did nothing to challenge the cruel pecking order within his own house. It is not enough to say that Slytherin values ambition. Ambition alone is not evil, but when ambition is filtered through contempt, it rots. Slytherin, as depicted in the books, is not a place where students are challenged to outgrow their biases. It is a house where those biases are rewarded, where mockery is power and silence is protection, where kindness is weakness and alliance with the elite is survival, where being born into the wrong family means you'll never climb the invisible ladder,